this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. And don't touch that, or you'll leave your greasy fingerprints behind. That's something that you hear regularly, but it's something that people experience daily. All you got to do if you have a smartphone is simply look at the glass, the cover of your smartphone. It's a non-porous surface, and if you look at it at the side, okay, or from the side, and kind of have it obliquely lit, you'll be able to see your prints all over the phone. And that's kind of a saying, isn't it, in life? Your prints were all over this. It doesn't necessarily mean criminal activity. It implies that you've been intimately involved in something. And sometimes that's a good thing, particularly if you're an individual that's a detailed person and you're a planner. Unlike me, I'm more of a big idea kind of guy, which is kind of weird in forensics, by the way. But today we're going to talk about something involving a case of a lady who was very successful. She lived up in North Carolina, and she was a realtor. And she was kind. But kindness is not going to be in this narrative, because she died in a most brutal way. And guess what? The perpetrator's fingerprints were all over it. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, when you have little kids and you've got them in their car seat, and they go through the various stages with the car seats, obviously. The parents and grandparents out there will know precisely what we're talking about here. All you have to do is look at the window that they're seated against, and there'll be smudges and smears and everything on the inside. And can I just say something real quick? I miss those smudges and smears. I really do. I've got my grandkids now, but, I think back to my kids, touching things, and we would get on to them about it. I miss that. I miss seeing those many times. Now I'm riding around in a pristine vehicle.
The thing is, you mentioned the smudges like they're clean. Mine always had Cheetos or, something on them. There was never just a pristine fingernail of a child. But, hey, Joe, on this particular story, this is one of those things that you played football in high school. Yeah. Did you play in college?
No, I broke my neck.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I lost several. I don't know. I had 4 offers, I think. Wow. Back then. They were all Service Academy or VMI, the Citadel. Sure. I was going to be in the military, but that's my C5. Player. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to go down that road with you, but yeah.
No, the reason I say that is because David Braxton, he was a football player, and I remember when he played at Wake Forest. David Braxton played at Wake Forest in the late 80s, and then ended up playing for the Vikings and the Bengals in the NFL. He had a 5-year career in the NFL. And the reason he caught my attention is because the only other real Wake Forest graduate that I remember making a name in the NFL was Brian Piccolo with the Chicago Bears.
Doggone it, I forgot that he was from Wake Forest.
Right. So anyway, that was good, kind of caught my attention. So when we started to look at this story, and I went, boy, David Braxton sounds familiar. So I did a little look, and I'm like, oh, there he is. Sure enough, that is his dad. We're talking about David Braxton's son here in this particular story. And he was also, by the way, Wake Forest, one of those really strong academic schools. Academically, you've got to be a mental giant to go to a Wake Forest or a Duke. And so when David Braxton goes to Wake Forest, his son goes to Duke. And David Braxton, plays at Duke for a couple of years. He's actually one of these he's an All-American academically. Okay. He was a good football player. He's a wide receiver, but he was an academic All-American 2 different years. That's pretty strong when you're playing at a D1 college. You've got to have some smarts.
That college is Duke.
Yeah.
It's hey, you know what else? He was very versatile too. I think the year before he started playing as a receiver, he had like a really high number of tackles the prior year, which means that he was playing defense as well. So he's kind of multifaceted.
Yeah. And, it's always tough when you're the kid of a ball player, that made it in the NFL. That's a big trail to, and he did. Brandon did a good job in high school and college. And the problem is the story today is not about what Brandon Braxton did on the football field. It's what Brandon Braxton did with and to a friend from high school.
Yeah.
Her name is Whitney Hurd. And Whitney Hurd was reported missing on July 11th. Now, when they reported her missing, that's when, family and friends are saying we can't get in touch with her. And nobody really realizes what day they last talked to her. And when they started thinking about it, Joe, nobody had heard from her since the 4th of July. So by the time she was reported missing, it was already a week.
Yeah.
And she was found on July 14th. And what got my attention on this was Whitney Hurd was found in her own condominium, in her own townhome, by a private investigator. Yeah,
and isn't that fascinating? Because that's not something that we hear. You and I being kids of the 60s, we grew up on Mannix.
Yeah.
And Barnaby Jones.
Wow.
And, my favorite was
Harry-O.
Rockford Files. And you see those private investigators in those television shows, and they're always involved in murder cases.
Yeah.
And it's like, they do get involved. I've been consulted by them before as an expert. I've given speeches at state private investigator meetings, and they're always a lot of fun to be around. But the lion's share of private investigators are not going to go out and discover a body.
No.
And that's what really I'm thinking. So the private investigator found the body. This is not like, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office or Charlotte Police Department up in North Carolina. It's a private investigator, which was really odd.
And he finds her on July 14th. She's reported missing July 11th. Now, I'm going to throw something out there. And because I thought this was kind of obvious, but obviously not. If I go missing, Joe, you don't hear from me and you report me missing, would you please come to my house and check it? And if you can't get in, go ahead and break in. You have my permission to break in and find my body.
Okay, everybody hears that now.
Yes, I'm doing it on the record.
I have your permission.
Yes.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Before you're going to report me missing, or report me missing, but come to my house. At least somebody come to my house if you're going to report me missing, because that's where she was found by the private detective. Now, if you're a loved one and you're reporting somebody missing and you haven't gone to their house, what are you doing for looking?
I know. I don't understand it. You know what this reminds me of? And we just covered these cases. I said it right. It kind of reminds me of the KC case with the people, the guys in the backyard, where they had to, you had people other than the police that had to go there and try to, search them out. It's not uncommon and we've used this term before, Dave, you and I have, identifying finders.
I know.
Finders are some of the most fascinating people you'll ever talk to in any investigation. And it can be, and God, this sounds horribly morbid. And it's not my intention to be disrespectful, but you get the greatest stories because it's people that randomly find a body. And just think about it, how you would react if it were you and you walk up on a deceased person or you gain entry. And I got to tell you, we're talking, let's see, you had said, now this is back in 2024, it's in July, the last time she was known to be in the land of the living. I think you had said the 4th.
Right.
And so
I tracked it back. It wasn't, because I was trying to figure out, again, You have me now looking at the finder, and I got to thank you for that. I never did it until you were talking about it a couple of shows ago, and you mentioned the finder. And I started thinking of how important the finder is to the story when it's somebody who's not a cop, you know?
It really is, because I've got to tell you, and I think that to a person, most investigators, if you're dealing with the finder, and sometimes the finder is hard. It's hard to peg down. I hate to keep using this kind of, I don't know, this kind of odd term for an individual, because you can get phone calls, or you can get flag downs, what cops call flag downs, where somebody steps into the road and they're like waving their hand at a cop that's just on their beat patrol. And then the cop gets out and they'll say, person's dead in the house. And the next thing you know, the person that flagged them down is gone. I mean, they don't hang around. And it used to be where we had, if you had payphones, you would get a hang up. There would be hang ups on the payphones where people would call, walk up, and, because you could punch in 911. You don't need any money for that. And then they would either drop the phone or they would hang up, and then the cops would roll in, and you're never going to know who that person is. And the fact that you do have them always, as an investigator, if I have a finder, I'm going to look at them long and hard, because the question I have is, what is it in this universe that puts you in the same location with not just a deceased person, but also a homicide victim? And listen, if you're not suspicious of that, there's good, healthy suspicion. Okay. It's not wrong to be suspicious of people. I want to abuse any of you out there that hear this and think that it's something negative. It's not. It's actually called discernment, and so you plug that in there, and you want to, take a long, hard look. But when you're talking about a PI, a private investigator, Dave, they don't work for free, brother. They don't work for free.
And that's why I'm saying, before you hire, before you do anything, I mean, would you not just go to the house? I guess that's what I'm a little bit perturbed with, is that nobody, and look, I don't know their family history. I don't know anything. Maybe they didn't live nearby, and called to do a welfare check. Yep. I would get that. I mean, we do have a lot of welfare checks, but they reported her missing. And that's different than calling and asking for a welfare check. Maybe they did, and the police said, hey, we can't even get in. And the police are not going to barge into your door. They can't do that unless they have probable cause to believe. Like if they poke their head in and they see a body laying on the ground and they're there to check on that person, they could go in on that. But that does not apply to a private investigator. Right.
If you're working for the family, now you can get, I would imagine, I guess if the cops really wanted to be, disagreeable, that's a kind word I'll use. Yeah. They could charge you with breaking and entering, maybe burglary, or certainly trespass.
Yeah.
But if you've got a family, but she's she's in her mid 30s. Yeah. Assuming she does in fact live there alone, she doesn't have someone that is, sharing that space with her. She's a grown woman. So from a legal standpoint, any kind of extended family or her immediate family, if it's a mom or dad or brother or sister, they actually don't have any kind of legal right, to barge into their relative's home. Now, if they have a key, and maybe this person said, come by and check on the house periodically, they can do that. But when you think about that, they've gone to the trouble of hiring a private investigator.
Yeah,
that speaks volumes. And I'm thinking about what you said about the distance, because there are some times, where folks are separated. My wife talks to her mother every day. Mm-hmm. And, my mother-in-law doesn't live here in this state. My mother doesn't live here in this state. I don't have any relatives other than my son and my wife that live here in this state. And so, if you talk to them regularly, then that's going to arouse your suspicions.
with Whitney Hurd, she was a real estate person and a professional at 32 years old. She was well thought of. She was well off. This is an upscale neighborhood. Okay. This is not a person who lived on that edge of society, Joe. Yep. She's living mainstream, well off, 32, got her own life, doesn't need anything. I mean, this is a successful woman, intelligent. I mean, there's a lot going on here that I still cannot get to the point of, okay, if police get a missing persons, I would think that, and I'm not knocking the police or anybody else. I'm just asking you, Joe, isn't the first thing they're going to do? We have a family who has not been able to get in touch with their loved one. Mm-hmm. This 32-year-old realtor has been reported missing now. Maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, but the captain says, hey, Joe, why aren't you and Dave in your patrol today? Why don't you guys run on over to Miss Hurd's house and just knock on the door, see if you see anything? That just seems like the first start, and that you would call the family. Hey, anybody let us in? Can we go inside? I mean, I don't know what the rules are here, but I'm just thinking if you're going to go to the trouble of reporting somebody missing, the first thing you would do is check out their home, car. Those are the two things I'm looking for. And by the way, when they went looking for her, Joe, her car was gone.
Yeah, and that's a big piece to this. Let's just say you have neighbors, all right, that you deal with day in and day out. You see them regularly. The one way that you might know that your neighbor is home is not that you physically see them, it's that you see their vehicle. And it is that vehicle, a 2014 white BMW X3, a little SUV that winds up being a big piece to this puzzle. My favorite Spider-Man that came out was the one with Tobey Maguire. I think it was Sam Raimi that directed it. I love that Spider-Man because it just seemed, and it of course had Willem Dafoe in it, who played one of the best bad guys ever in the Green Goblin. And I love the attention that they paid to the detail in that movie. And one of the things that really stands out for me is there's that one scene where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, or before he's actually Spider-Man, after he's bit, he suddenly realizes that he can climb a wall. And they do a close-up. It's like a micro shot of his finger pad. And you can see the little hairs that pop out of the finger pad, and all of a sudden it facilitates him climbing up a wall. You know, I know that's a cartoon or, it's a comic, or whatever. I don't watch those kinds of movies anymore. But that particular demonstration in that movie says a lot about fingerprints and how they work. Because, and I've mentioned this before in the distant past in other cases, but just as kind of a quick primer, fingerprints are not something that you have on the ends of your fingers. Fingerprints are something that you leave behind. And that's one of the statements that I make to my students all the time at Jack State. When we're talking about, when I'm teaching my intro to forensics class. So what do you have on the tips of your fingers? Well, you have a finger pad, okay? And you have what are referred to as friction ridges. And you have fatty lipid oils that come out of those pads. There's pores that you can actually see. Did you know that you can actually see when you lift a fingerprint, when you're looking at what's referred to as the minutia, which there are all these different types of little features that we look for in a very specific way regarding fingerprints, that one of the features that we look at and the positioning of that feature relative to the rest of the print are pores. And when you see a pore, that space shows up in a very symmetrical appearance on the actual lifted print, and it's unique. Okay. And so contained on the surface of these friction ridges are all these bits of minutia. Going back to Spider-Man, one of the things that one of the ways that fingers function when we're picking things up is that you have these lines and curves and hills and valleys and all these things on the tips of your fingers, and they're friction ridges so you can pick things up, and you leave a print behind as a result of touching the surface. And in this case, there were prints in addition to DNA. You know, we've kind of robbed traditional fingerprinting now, and DNA uses, or people in the vernacular, common vernacular, will say DNA fingerprints. But the origin of the term fingerprint goes back hundreds of years, even back to ancient China, where they would use a fingerprint as an identifier in a clay mold for currency exchange, for exchange for goods. So you would carry around proof of your fingerprint. And if you're dealing with somebody regularly, they would have your fingerprint on file that had been mashed down into soft clay. And it was one of the ways back then, all those years ago, you know, probably when my ancestors were still living in thatched, roof huts or wherever it was. And, you know, they had no higher learning or perception at that point in time. The Chinese were doing this long in advance of what was going on in Europe. But here's an interesting little factoid, because we hear about fingerprints quite a bit as that they are unique to each and every one of us. Dave, did you know that there has never been an empirical scientific study that validates that assertion?
So how do they say that?
Because they've never found to, or that are alike. However, if you go back and you look at the Madrid train bombing, right. They had a guy where they found a latent print on a plastic bag, and 5 independent fingerprint examiners looked at that print and said it all belonged to this guy who happened to have recently converted to Islam and was an attorney like in the Pacific Northwest. They hooked him up and kept him in jail. And he had not been in Spain where this train blew up. And it turned out to be a guy that was a Moroccan. And that latent print matched that guy's friction ridges in Morocco. And so they had, tied it back to that. So there's never been like an empirical scientific study, to validate that scientific statement or that assertion rather.
But I know how they pulled that off in that train thing.
Yeah, I know. And you really wonder because when they lifted the latent prints in that case, particularly off of a plastic, just think about if you go to Walmart or any grocery store and they bag it up, and I miss paper bags, and they bag it up in these plastic bags. It's kind of a non-porous smooth surface where you can transfer that oil onto that surface and they can lift the print from there. But yeah, and so it's just an assertion that for years and years people have held on to. But I truly do, Dave, that as time goes by and we're using AI a lot more for scientific purposes, there might be some things that develop over the years that are going to point to say, well, maybe fingerprints are not necessarily foolproof.
Or how about this? Go and watch the Nicolas Cage film from 1999, 2000, Gone in 60 Seconds, where the really smart kid, he glued on other fingerprints onto their fingers. I mean, there you go. All of a sudden, yeah. So let me back up for a minute, because the fingerprints are a huge part of this. But what we had here was not a lack of communication. It was David Braxton, or Brandon Braxton, rather. Brandon Braxton, after he goes to the Duke and all that, and he comes back home, and he decides, and I'm looking for any kind of career thing that he did. I really can't find out much about what
there's nothing I can find.
Yeah.
No.
And so I'm guessing, like many young people who leave with big dreams of You're playing for a D1 school. Duke is one. You're academically very strong, that you're going to have a pretty good future. You're laying out, you're getting a good head start on life as an adult if you're a ball player at Duke and you're an academic All-American. Those are some big things, okay? And you're coming from an academically strong family with your dad, and here you go. Now, you don't accomplish anything after you get it. You come back home, and the first thing you think to do is to look up a girl that you knew were not romantically involved with. You were just friends, acquaintances. You had friendships in high school with a number of different people that you hung out with. And apparently, she saw him as a platonic friend. We're just friends. That's it. He saw her as much, much more. Because what we have been able to figure out is that Brandon Braxton, after connecting as a friend, he decided, or he began doing more than she wanted him to do. Meaning, yes, they hung out at first. Yes, when they reconnected, they were friends. But that was it. She had a brick wall waterfall right there saying, it ain't going any further than this. And it got to the point where he started, for want of a better word, stalking. Now, I'm not saying he was doing anything stalkerish. I just don't know another term when somebody is hanging out that you don't want to hang out, or is that a definition of a stalker? Because this guy actually got drunk, went to her house, tried to get in. She wouldn't let him in, and he fell asleep in his car in her driveway, or passed out, depending on how you look at it. She called the police on him when he broke into her home when she wasn't home. So there are some issues here. They started off as friends in high school. They rekindled their friendship, not romantic, and he wants more, and she doesn't want it. He won't leave her alone. That's what I'm seeing. Is that? Do you think that's correct?
Women, I think it is correct. And I like to think, and I'll defer to my colleagues in criminology, criminal behavior, with degrees of stalking. I think that there are things that go on and it snowballs, particularly if somebody has some kind of mental imbalance or emotional imbalance in their perception. And I mean, we've all been there. We perceive things about other people, maybe a relationship that we long for, and it turns out that this isn't going to go anywhere. And some people have a hard time just saying, oh, okay, well, it's not going to go anywhere. Next, but with someone like this young woman who's 32 years old, quite lovely and very successful, women have a keen sense of, they have a creep meter. Okay. And I think that's just, there's an accuracy to that, because I think that just naturally, they view themselves as being threatened by somebody that's given off this really, weird vibe, perhaps. And we've heard that over and over again. I'm not going to mention any names, but, we've heard that over and over again about, I don't know, certain cases that may be on the radar in Idaho right now. And we've heard it time and time again with people that have in fact been stalked, and they, are shot or stabbed or raped, or just assaulted because they're not giving the attention to the individual. Because the reality of that, the person that's the object of the desire here, their reality is, look, I'm working. I'm just trying to live my life. Yeah, I'll be kind to you. And by all indications, she's a very kind person. But unfortunately, she entered onto the radar of Braxton. And what happened next is pure horror. I go to teach and I can't shut my mouth up. Start going on about fingerprints and whatnot. And, here I am. I'm going to give you a lecture on it, Dave. And I want to come back to this physical designator, if you will, that was found at the scene. But we had mentioned something a few moments ago. There's something that was not at the scene that played a big role in this, and that was her car. Was it not, Dave?
Yep.
Her car could not be found at the home.
Her people in her neighborhood knew that she was very proud of her car. People that knew her knew that her car was something she was proud of. She liked, and by the way, she didn't let anybody else drive her car. You know, a lot of us have a kind of peculiar thing about it. It can be something small. With her, it was her car. No, you're not driving my car. This is mine. You can't drive it. I've been that way about certain cars I've had, just FYI. Yeah. And so I understand that. But this was something people knew. And her phone was also missing. So they find her at her home. And again, boggles my mind that she's last seen July 4th. That's the time that when they tracked it back. July 11th, they report her missing, they being the family. And on July 14th, a private investigator finds her where? In her own home. Now, she is found where her car is gone, phone's gone, and a neighbor actually saw her car being driven down the road, not by Whitney. It was being driven by a man. There was nobody in the passenger seat that she could see. And so I say she, the neighbor. So we know that the car is gone and that it was driven away by a man, and that as a matter of fact, Whitney did not allow anybody to drive her car. So
yeah, and boy, that would be a huge tell for people that see her daily. You know how many? Well, I'll think about it for myself as well. But you know, both of us, we kind of live. You know, we live in neighborhoods and whatnot, like so many other people do. And you're standing out in your yard, and you happen to raise your hand as the guy that lives on the corner comes home from work, or if they're out on their, out walking their dog or whatever it is. There's a familiarity that comes about as a result of living around people. Can you imagine? This guy is a key witness in this particular case, Dave, that notices that her car, who he's never seen anybody else driving, maybe he has personal knowledge of her and knows that no one touches this car.
Actually, it's important to note it was a female.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The female that bears witness to this looks and sees a grown man driving her car, and she's not in it. Well, that's a big tell from an investigative standpoint. But here's the thing about it. They did not find the car at the scene, but unfortunately, they found her when the PI entered the home. He actually discovered her remains. And I'll go ahead and tell you, man, this is Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. We're right in the dead of summer at this point in time. It's going to be hot, and not just hot, but there's no air moving. Her body is found wrapped in a blanket, but I can tell you when this guy walked in the door, he didn't have to go very far before he realized there was something in the house that was decomposing. By this time, we're talking the 4th. And give me that date one more time. She's actually found on the 14th. So 14th,
10 days.
Yeah, so 10 days later, she's found. She's going to be in at least a moderate state of decomposition by this point in time. But here's the thing about it. Whoever had done what we're about to reveal to her had wrapped her in a blanket, okay, and left her there in her home. Now, when they were able to remove the blanket, which probably would have been super saturated with not just blood, but also what we refer to as decompositional fluid as well, they discovered she had been stabbed over and over and over and over again. So back to what you and I have discussed many times, Dave, I think that, you can agree at this point that stabbing is so intimate. It's a very up close and personal kind of event. There's generally an effort to destroy the subject. And just think, if you're being rejected by somebody and you have this fixation on her, what better to end somebody's life with than an edged weapon where you're intimately on top of her, driving this knife over and over and over into her body. But then you have this kind of I don't know, lucid moment of lucidity. And you realize that I've just committed a homicide here with a knife on a woman that the police have been called. They've been called to this residence before, and there's connectivity between her and me. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to wrap the body in a blanket. Well, why did you do that? Well, probably there's face covering involved as well. We know from many, many years of studying these things that if the face is covered on a homicide victim, that gives you an indication that the subject that did the killing was experiencing extreme guilt. There's a high probability that they knew one another because, contrary to what people think, the dead do not close their eyes. Most of the time when eyes are closed, it's at the hand of another. You can see eyes that are kind of slit-like, when you get there. And I've had bodies whose eyes are closed, but it is the exception as opposed to the norm. He's looking at her, Dave. He has a desire to cover her body. And brother, did he ever? And he's got to jump on him now. This has probably happened well in advance of when she was reported missing, which would have been July the 11th, I believe, according to you.
Right.
So this event could have occurred back on July the 5th for all we know.
That's
or
what
maybe
I was
even
looking
the
at.
4th. Yeah.
That's what I was looking at. I was trying to build a timeline, because I always try to build a timeline for myself. That's how I think. And that's why I always try to make it personal. Like I did at the very beginning, but if you're going to report me missing, please check my house. Okay. Before you get police involved, just come and see if then when you call and say, hey, I came to his house, he's not coming to the door. In this particular case, though, and maybe this is why they didn't purge the door, maybe because her car was missing. Her car wasn't in the driveway. But a quick canvass of the neighborhood, Joe, police would have found out that, yeah, her car is missing. And her neighbor saw the car leaving the neighborhood with a man driving it by himself. That would be kind of indicative of a problem. Now, they did find the car about a week later. Police still have not said where they found the vehicle. But they did not immediately find her phone with the vehicle. They did bring in Brandon Braxton to have a chat early on in this investigation.
Yeah, they did. And lo and behold, Dave, when they did find her car, one of the things that, is obviously done, particularly nowadays, is you're going to swab the area for DNA, see if you recover any kind of foreign DNA. And isn't it kind of an interesting thought here that she doesn't allow anybody else to drive that car. So let's just say that you're touching the gear lever, you're touching the steering wheel, the blinker, the door handle. You're leaving behind little bits of you. Okay. You can leave behind DNA, perhaps touch DNA or trace DNA as they prefer it to be called in Idaho.
Really? Instead of touch DNA? Wait a minute. I've heard it called touch DNA, but now they want it to be called trace DNA?
Well, yeah, and that's truly the clinical term. With trace DNA is generally what you hear. It's just interesting now with it, and I can't get this out of my mind because it keeps going back and forth with the Koberger case. His defense counsel has asked that they not use the term touch DNA because it implies an intimacy where you're literally touching somebody. They want the court to adjust the language. So, and this has been like a big, with that case, it's been like an English class. I was waiting for her to start talking about gerunds and subjects and predicates and everything else. But yeah, they want to use the term trace DNA. But trace DNA is still that particulate bit of DNA that is left behind in a case, generally comes from skin cells, and it's an incomplete strand. And so there's certain methodologies that you have to go through in order to, kind of tie this back. But they did find fingerprints within the car, and lo and behold, they actually tie back to Braxton, Dave, and he had abandoned the car. I guess, again, we go back to this term of lucidity. He's driving around in a dead woman's car who he probably knows she's going to be found. I don't care how insane you might appear to other people. He had this element of self-preservation, didn't he? And he wanted to put as much distance as he could between himself and the car. But Dave, we had something interesting happen in this particular case with Braxton, and I don't know that we've had it before, but it involves a message that was sent out from the jailhouse. Now, was he or was he not arrested for something that was unrelated to a homicide? It was something else that had brought him there.
Well, this has been a weird case to follow because of how limiting they are in terms of what they're releasing in information, like not telling us where the car was found. This only happened last July. We're not looking at 5 years ago. We're not looking at Othram having to help us solve this. We're looking at a case that is fairly new, and it just took 8 months between her death and them making the arrest of Braxton. But we know that we don't know where they found the car. We do know that he was arrested. Braxton was. Brandon Braxton was in the Mecklenburg County Jail on an unrelated charge, meaning unrelated to the homicide. But we don't know exactly why he was in there. But I'm guessing, no, I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to say that they got him for the stolen car or anything else, because her car was reported stolen. When her body was found inside her townhome, the car was missing. So she's here. She doesn't let anybody drive it. It's stolen. And when they recovered the vehicle, that's where they found the DNA that's where they tracked it back with fingerprints and DNA. It went to Braxton, and he was in the Mecklenburg County Jail. Now, he was complaining about a number of things in the jail. And apparently in this jail, they have a kiosk where you can access and leave notes and things, whether it's a complaint about the food or the showers or whatever. And that's what they being the officers at the jail, got a complaint note. And in that complaint note, they got an admission of guilt on this murder. Now, it wasn't signed. It wasn't an actual confession with my name on it and my thumbprint and all that. It was an admission of guilt, apparently with information not known to anybody but the killer. And when they got this, as they're trying to figure out, well, who wrote the note? All they did, Joe, they went back and looked at let's see, you're in jail. What are a couple of things we know about jail? They're watching inmates all the time.
Everything.
There's cameras everywhere. And if you're going to use a kiosk, you have to log in. You have to, it's time stamped. And if they match up, if this time stamped note was at 8:54 p.m. and Dave Mack is standing at the kiosk at 8:54 p.m. and nobody else is standing at the kiosk at 8:54 p.m. and the note is timestamped 8:54 p.m. It's kind of obvious and clear to all that Dave Mack wrote the note, which is exactly what happened with Brandon Braxton.
Yeah, and he actually stated, Dave, and it's been tied or credited to him, that he states on this note that he killed Whitney Hurd. I don't know, if you're some criminal mastermind, you're not necessarily going to go around running your mouth about that sort of thing. But the fact that he did, and he should know better by that point in time, that he is being watched. Everything that he does is being watched. It brings me to the idea, do you think he wanted to be caught, Dave? Was he unburdening himself in some way, do you think?
There are a couple of things that are said, Joe. In particular, when they being investigators, they brought him in and they were talking, because you got to remember, they have the incident where Whitney Hurd called police to report a break-in by Brandon Braxton. They'd had other things involving Braxton at that address. So he was the guy they went to and interviewed him. They interviewed him on July 24th. We're talking, 10 days after finding the body.
Yeah.
And he was a person of interest. But in their interview with him, he said, yes, I've been inside Whitney's home. No, I have not been in her car. So when he says, I made notes of this, okay? He tells police he has been inside her home, but never in her car. They find his fingerprints inside Whitney's vehicle. Phone records from the time in question reveal that Braxton was in the area at the suspected time of the murder. And they're holding that information back too. Again, I pointed out, last time anybody saw her July 4th, she's reported missing July 11th. The private eye finds her on July 14th. That's our timetable. And somewhere in there.
Yeah. And to, kind of pair what we had said earlier about fingerprints. In this particular case, we don't just physically have prints left behind by friction ridges on fingers. And now we have a DNA fingerprint. Oh, and by the by, also a digital fingerprint. Either way you look at it, the physical evidence and the digital evidence. And oh, by the way, the note that was written by Braxton on March the 3rd, 2025, simply said, "I killed Whitney Hurd." There will be more on this case. We'll find out where the road leads, and perhaps, just perhaps, investigators will reveal more data in this ongoing investigation. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.